Okay, ladies, in this video, I want to help you as I'm learning myself to harness the power of thankfulness in my life, especially in times of struggle and worry. Now, we've all read the passage that Paul writes in Philippians chapter 4. Don't worry, don't be anxious about anything and everything. Bring your requests to the Lord with thanksgiving. Bring your requests and pray and ask God for help. Now, I don't know about you, but in that passage, it's always been this weird word that's in there. Be thankful with thanksgiving. Wait a second, I'm upset, I'm worried. Is that really supposed to be my reaction when I'm upset and stressed, is to be thankful? It just seems like that word is out of place. But in fact, there is a lot of power to thankfulness, and that's what I want to talk to you about today, that when you're in times of struggle and trial, I don't know if you're a professional worrier like I am, but my first reaction when things are hard and scary is to worry, to do the exact opposite that Paul tells us to do. But not only that, it's not that my first reaction is to be worried. A lot of times I'm forgetting to pray, but I'm definitely not thinking about being thankful. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Is that really supposed to be our response in times of trial, that we should be thankful? What does that mean? What does that look like? Okay, a few years ago, I read a book by Ann Voskamp called 1,000 Gifts. I don't know if you've read it. If you haven't, you should. It's a great read, and I'll link it down below. But in her book, she just talks about this whole idea of how we could be thankful and to appreciate the things that we have in our life, all of it. Capturing what Paul's talking about, or all throughout Scripture, when we see this word thankfulness showing up in times of trial and stress for Jesus and for other believers. So the first key to understanding how you can harness the power of thankfulness in your life is to understand what thankfulness means. So that's my first point today, is to say, the root words in the Greek language of what Thanksgiving is about, the word in the Greek is called Eucharisteo. Okay, so what does it matter that, am I just trying to be smart by giving you the Greek word for Thanksgiving? No, there's a reason for that, because in the root words is where we really can capture what thankfulness and Thanksgiving is all about, and why it should be something we use in our life that brings us through times of trial and hardship. And so here's why. In the root word of Eucharisteo is the word charis, and the word charis in Greek means grace. Now, hopefully you've heard of the word grace, which means God's unmerited favor for us, all that he's done for us that was not of any of our own doing. When he sent Jesus to walk among us, to die on a cross and to rise again, was all about God's grace of giving us favor, giving us a gift that we didn't deserve and that we didn't earn. So within the word thanksgiving, in Eucharisteo, the root word is charis, meaning grace. So within our ability to be thankful, it's rooted in understanding God's grace. So our thankfulness is born out of this idea of being reminded of who God is and what he's already done for us. So think about that. Can you start to begin to see how the word thankfulness or thanksgiving could be used in times of trial? If we're thinking about the root word of thanksgiving, Eucharisteo is grace, is charis, that we can be thankful people for no other reason than we understand what God has done for us already. But it's not just charis, it's not just grace that we find in Eucharisteo. We also find a parallel word, chara, which means joy. So now all of a sudden, within the word thanksgiving, of the idea of being thankful, we have two key words that are important for us when we think about why we could be thankful in times of hardship. That we are processing our situations through understanding God's grace, what he's already poured out in our lives for good. And there's something about finding joy then. That our perspective changes from being just looking at the situation we're in that's scary and hard and bringing us anxiety, and being able to look through the lens of thankfulness, Eucharisteo, thinking, I need to see my situations in my life through God's grace, understanding his unmerited favor in my life, and that I can have joy because God's already been there for me, walked with me, helped me, and done mighty things in my life. So do you see how that can kind of start to work together? That we can find joy, even in our suffering. We can bring our requests to God when we're worried and anxious, and we can be thankful because we're reminded first of God's grace, and that because of all he's done in our life, we can find joy. So ladies, the practical application here is if you want to continue to fight against worry and anxiety in your life, employ the power of thankfulness in your life. Be thankful first before you do anything else. That's what I'm really trying to do. I have some other key verses that I pull from, one of which is Philippians chapter 4. But to just replace my worry and anxious thoughts and to be quick to be, what am I already thankful for that God's done in my life? First and foremost, that he died for my sins, and that he set me free from all the pain and suffering of this world and the hopelessness that it offers us. But also just being reminded of some of the other things he's done in other situations, how he's provided, how he's been faithful, to be reminded of his character and what he's already done for me. That just helps me to kind of see everything then in my current situation that's bringing me angst and fear, to remember who God is, charis, his grace, that he is the God who is faithful and who follows through. And when we focus on being thankful, then we can see life in those situations in a different way. And listen, there was no better model of this than Jesus himself. We see him model that when he's talking about the first communion, when he's explaining to the disciples. They have no idea what's about to happen, but Jesus did. And what he says is he takes the bread. Look in 1 Corinthians 11, where he takes the bread and he gives thanks for it. And he's saying, this is my body that's going to be broken for you. And this wine is going to symbolize my blood that's going to be spilled for you. And he's giving thanks in explaining that. Not because Jesus was thankful that that was what he had to go do to suffer and die for us. It was a brutal, painful, awful death. But he understood that Eucharisteo, thanksgiving in his life, was he knew God's bigger plan, that God was with him because he was God. He had the strength and the ability and the knowledge of God. And he knew that the joy then set before him that we talk about in Hebrews chapter 12, that he could consider it joy, that he could scorn the shame of the cross because Jesus understood Eucharisteo, that he could be focused on the character and nature of God, which he already possessed, and could see that the joy was God had a plan through what he had to suffer. And ladies, whatever situation you're in, God has a plan for what you're working through. So employ the power, harness the power of thankfulness in your life, replace a thankful heart with your heart of fear, and see how that doesn't just change all of your perspective.